Welcome to Kingdom Metalworks. Today's project, we're going to make a reverse curve. Reverse curve panels, probably one of the most difficult to make, and I make them a certain way, which in my mind makes it a little easier because it's fully under control. So as you can see, it has a reverse curve. This panel is not to any particular car, it's just a panel that I had a student make up just to give him the idea or understanding of the whole format and all the different steps. So today's steps, the session that we're into today, is going to be where do we start? We've got to start with a flat sheet of metal, and then we've got to have a pattern. So if you come on over here, you'll be able to see that we have a piece of, it's kind of butcher's paper, or you can even get it at Home Depot. It's just the construction paper, and basically I'm laying it down over the existing panel to give me a reference of size and the layout of the size to the piece of metal that I'm going to have. So I've covered all my bases. As you can see, I've got a little extra. I don't want to make it so small that I don't have what they call a little swivel or movement to my panel valley. Especially if you're learning how to do one, you need a little bit extra material just so you can come up with a perfect size panel with the perfect size shape, and then you just do a little edge trimming to make it fit perfectly to whatever other panels are coming onto it. So here we are, we've got the layout of the pattern, and I'm going to straight away put this aside. I'm going to lay out my piece of material. And we're just going to cut out the piece that we need. Get the markers. I'm going to use a large pen so it'll be easily visible. That way it comes up on camera. As you can see, I've left a little extra on the back end of it. This can be as long or as short as you want it. On this particular panel right here, I've only made it X amount long. It's generally about this size, and then the part that goes from this panel to the door is going to be extra long. This is the center of the fender. The outside of the fender comes out here. The catwalk is what we call it in England, or the reverse curve in America, is right here. And as you can see, it goes from narrow to more broad. It's going through. This goes into the hood section or to the nose of the car that drops down here. So it all comes into whatever shape you want to make to fit the project that you're doing. But the basics are still the same. So here we have the layout of our Notice it has a flange on the very front, right in here. So I'm just going to add a little extra section just so that that can be flipped over. It's probably going to be about an inch coming down and then coming down through. So here we have our piece of metal laid out basically to what we want. So now we're going to shear this off, get rid of the rest of the sheet. So here we have the basic panel cut out. On this particular material, we have plastic coating. So that's the other thing you need to remove, is the plastic coating before we even start hammering, dressing and shaping our metal. Now, just for the video sake, I'm going to deal with that a little bit later. So then we get to the second stage. Once we've made our paper pattern to our panel, we now know the shape of it. The paper pattern needs to be really accurate. The more accurate the paper pattern, the more accurate the panel. As I was sharing, we have a curvature line, we have a curvature line, and we have a taper. It goes from narrow to broad. We also have a depth. This is slightly deeper than this. This is slightly more full than this. So this is coming into the headlamp area, and this is coming back out to the door. So in order for us to start off and start shaping and be on track, because it all comes down to making an accurate pattern, we have to make some sweeps. So say this was a panel that's on the car, or say this is a panel that you're just going to copy. We're basically looking at making profiles and sweeps. I call this a sweep because it's fairly long, and I call this a profile because it is fairly short and comes across. So you can see how I'm making one fit the other and gives me the representation and the flow through, and then these fit to the panel. Okay, so you might ask me, well, gosh, how did you make these up? Where did you get these from? Well, let me show you. You take a flat strip of steel, it could be 20 gauge. I'm using, for the aluminum, or aluminium as we say in England, 3003. It's half hard and it's 0.063. So there you have it. Nice piece of material, gives you a nice stout fender top and catwalk. Come over to the shrinker and we'll have a little look at what I'm going to accomplish. So by putting the strip in, I'm then going to start manipulating and shaping up the metal. And what I find the easiest thing to do is basically take an area where you have a start finish. I got a little center line right on the edge. I'm going to choose a point to sink it down in the panel. If you start crowning it over the top of the panel first, it's going to be a little bit challenging to make it fit into the valley. So I like to do the most difficult part first. To me, that's the valley. So I'll place a little bit of shrinking in here. And all I do is just gently shape this in. As you can see, as I'm shrinking it, it's pulling the material around, and what was flat is now curved. And I just got to keep on trying it to the panel that I'm making. See how we're going, see where the flow and go is. As you can see, we're starting to come in quite nicely. We're going to come in a little bit more. This is what takes the time, but the purpose for these is really important in the process of making a reverse curve panel. The reason being is because when you make a reverse curve panel, the valley is the part that drops in. And it's difficult to get your panel to fit to the car. So as you can see, just a little bit of manipulation and I'm getting this profile to fit in. Once I've got the sweep made from here all the way through into here, I then start shrinking on the outside edge, but I need this section to fit from here all the way through to here first. Then I pick my point of reference, which is here, then it starts coming back over. So just to save time, I've made a profile up already. But that profile only sits in one position. As it comes back, as you can see, it changes shape. So it's no longer good for another area on the panel. So I marked the panel on where this profile goes. So that's my first stage, and that's the shape of my pattern. Profile and panel. Okay, the other one that I made up, I didn't make it quite as long. Coming out to the outside edge, this can be as long as you want it to be, but it is in a fairly flat status without too much crown and shape. If it has crown and shape, then you may want to make it a little bit longer on the profile. Once again, it has a reference point. That reference point sits on here, and the profile fits. So now I have two profile gauges that fit that distance. Once I've spent the time making those, I then need to make my length. So the profile gauge, or what we call a sweep, because it's longitudinal, fits in a certain area, and it gets to a certain point where that will fit relatively well. As I said, this was a panel that a student made up. We made the profiles, and this was his first attempt, and it was just a sample so that he could get the direction. He got his to fit really well. So having said that, we also have a profile that goes in this direction, as you can see. So it fits the panel not only on this section, but also on this section. And then as you go further forward, you can see, turning the panel around, that it also fits relatively well through this section. I'm not going to say perfectly, because the whole goal is I'm not going to reproduce this panel. I'm going to make one that's a little bit deeper, a little bit more pronounced, to marry up to these. As you can see, we have some irregularities, we have some highs and lows, which is why the sweep profile may not fit 100%, but it's very close. This panel needs detailing, shaping to conform to this part here. So we then pick out the reference point with our pen of where is the start, the finish, and the middle of the return curve, the catwalk section. So as I look down the light line, I see roughly we have a start, we have a finish, and we have a center. And I do the same roughly on the back end. We have a start, we have a finish, and we have a center. Having said that, this is exactly how I want my panel to fit. I need to try it on the paper pattern to make this perfectly in line with my start and finishes. I can then mark it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out my paper pattern. I've got 1, 2, 3 coming through. I have my piece of material laid out. I'm going to lay out 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. And what we have now is our sweep profile that comes from the front section, coming down through. I now use that to conform my shaping coming in. So I need to mark on, once again, my little front sections right here. I need to use correspondence from those to these. Let me just come through. And so there we have the layout of the panel. Because I made this panel a little longer, I'm just going to extend these through. So now we have it laid out on one side. Because it's a reverse curve, we need to lay it out on the other side, because when we shape the panel in this section through here, we're going to be working from this side of the panel, shape. When we do the reverse curve, coming into the throw over section, we'll be working upside down, working in here, at the same time as manipulating the panel so that we're not running over the English wheel when we start wheeling through in here after we've shaped it with the mallet on the lead shop bag. We then start wheeling. We don't want to touch anywhere in this valley section. To me, it's a no strike zone. It's a no hit. This area hasn't been wheeled or touched or anything. It's just a go and flow with the manipulation of bending and flexing. This curve comes in by shaping this and shaping this. And the direction it goes and flows depends on how much shape you put in here and how much shape you put in here and the stretch that you're doing. So, there's the beginning stages of the layout and how to achieve the panel that you want. You start off with your sheet metal, you do your layout. Like I say, I've already put it into a fan section to give me that flow from narrow to a wider. That will be determined by your pattern, by the panel that's on the vehicle. So here you go. First stage is taken care of. Stay tuned and we'll have another session of the beginning shaping and the manipulation of the first stages of the catwalk.